What is up, guys? It is Chris here with Crew3 Podcast. Today we're bringing you guys a very budget-friendly green-white hardened scales list. This list is under 20 tickets on Modo and very budget-friendly IRL as well, and it's going to feature one of the new cards from M21, so hopefully you guys will like this. At the end here, we're going to go over some of these cards I have over here as far as substitutes, some interesting other interactions that I found, but first we're going to start off going over the main deck here and explain to you kind of how this deck works, what some of the cards do, so on and so forth. So starting off here, the namesake of the deck here is Hardened Scales. This is going to give us an extra +1/+1 counter whenever we put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. Our best friend here is going to be called Servant of the Scale. This enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it, so if we've already got a Hardened Scales in play, it's a 2/2, then whenever it dies, it counts the number of +1/+1 counters that were on it and puts it on another creature. That's relevant because it's interaction with the azolith, which isn't in this deck now, but if you guys wanted to put it in the deck, you certainly could, and it has a great interaction with that card. Moving on, we've got Experiment 1. This is just a great card from the second printing of the Ravnica, and it's got the Evolve mechanic. So this card, another one that just gets big very quickly and gives itself +1/+1 counters, which is one of the cornerstones of cards we want in this deck. So right out the ones is going to be Land War Elves. Just great acceleration. This is a deck that really wants to power out a lot of cards quickly, so just having a few of this type of effects to explode really quickly is going to be what this deck wants. Moving on to our twos, we've got Huadley's Raptor. I've got no idea how you say this card. If you guys know, go ahead and throw it down in the comments. It's a Raptor, it's a dinosaur, it's a 2/3 Vigilance creature, and when it comes into play, we're going to proliferate. This works how we want it to with Hardened Scales. So if we've got two creatures with +1/+1 counters, they'll each get the benefit, and you'll get 4 +1/+1 counters total. So great stats, just efficient card overall, and it's got that bonus effect that we're looking for. Similar to that, we've got Avatar of the Resolute. This one is a double green for a 3/2, and when it comes into play, it gets a +1/+1 counter for each other creature that's got a +1/+1 counter on it. So when it comes into play, this thing's already going to be, a 5/4, a 6/5, something like that. Oh, by the way, it's got reach and trample. So this has got a lot of great stats on it. This is going to beat down really hard in this style of deck here. Our next card here is kind of a nice filler card. This is one of the best cards. There's a lot of cards that do this kind of effect, but I like this one because of the options that it gives you. So when this comes into play, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, or you can proliferate. So if you're light on creatures when it comes into play, you can just make your avatar bigger, or make itself bigger if you really have to. Just make a 3/3 creature. But if you've already got a little bit of an army going, that proliferate to get a bunch of +1/+1 counters going, really going to be sick. Next card here is Anafenza, Kintree Spirit. This is one of the best cards in the deck, in my opinion. Unfortunately, it's legendary, and it's a double white, which is a little bit tough on the mana. But you still have to play this card. This card is so good. This is another one, just, each creature, when it comes into play, bolsters. You start looking at putting 3, 4, 5 +1/+1 counters on something, depending on the number of effects you have out. This card quickly takes over the game and makes every creature you play just a one-man army on its own. So definitely one of the best cards in the deck here. Then we're going to move on to this new card from M21, Conclave Mentor. This is basically a 2/2 with the Hardened Scales effect attached. It does gain you life equal to its power when it dies, which can be helpful in the burn matchup. But for the most part, we're looking for this as a replacement for the Windy Constrictor that the green-black version of this deck plays. We've got one spell in the deck, as in Dromoka's Command. This, your most relevant abilities are the bottom two. You want to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature and then have it fight something. Obviously, in our deck, we're hoping that +1/+1 counter is 2, maybe 3 +1/+1 counters, but who's counting, The first mode can also be somewhat relevant. If you're, again, against the burn matchup, you can prevent damage that a sorcery would do. Really only relevant if they're playing like Boros Charm or one of the big burn spells. It's the only time you want to do something like that, versus how much power this gives you, and the fact that it'll let you remove one of their creatures, which, deals damage over multiple turns. So definitely worth an include in this deck here. One of my favorite cards is Rishkar Pima Renegade. I like this because it makes itself a huge creature and another way to add counters to something else. Again, hopefully adding 4 +1/+1 counters or more total, but also lets you ramp into your Virtuous Gear Hulk, which is our last card here, if you were able to put +1/+1 counters on creatures and they survived. This Virtuous Gear Hulk is another one-man army card. This is just great in all situations. I picked this card as kind of our top end because even on its own, it's just an 8/8 that can't be killed by Fatal Push. It does it all. It slices, it dices, it walks through a city. So, yeah, and then obviously if you have a bunch of creatures out, this is probably going to win you the game. I mean, I can't imagine a deck surviving against adding 8 power to the board if you already had several creatures out with +1/+1 counters on it. So this is going to be our finisher, and definitely a card I think you want to have in this deck here. Our budget replacement for Walking Ballista is a card called Chamber Sentry that I found. This is really nifty and definitely worth the include. I like the style effect no matter what. We've got a lot of ways to add counters to this, and just being able to pick off opponents' creatures in any kind of aggro mirror or creature mirror is going to be really good. Also, just giving our deck reach, just to be able to finish off those last several points of the opponent if they've mucked up our ground creatures, or we put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on this guy, and it's tough to attack. You can finish people off not through the combat step with this card, which in my opinion makes it worth playing. So again, now we're going to go over just some of the cards that I thought would be worth talking about. Some people ask us, hey, what can I substitute? What other cards would be good? Or what if I do have some of the non-budget options to this deck? So we're going to go ahead and talk about those real quick. Bringing this over here. The first is the Azolith. I think it's worth playing 2 in this deck if you have the card. It's not a must include by any stretch of the imagination, but it is pretty nifty and can pretty easily replace some of our first cuts, which is going to be like Pollen Bright Druid, or maybe even like a Raptor or so. It's pretty easy to slide 2 of these in here if you want. Walking Ballista, just an upgrade over Chamber Sentry. If you want to play both, if you had Walking Ballista and you wanted to get Chamber Sentry, I recommend you play this cute card, Siege Hornceratops. Whenever it does dealt damage and survives, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So this is one where, you can surprise people by attacking, pinging it with Walking Ballista counters, pinging it with a Chamber Sentry, and all of a sudden you've got a 10/10 and they're dead. So just kind of a cute thing to consider. It may not be worth it if you're trying to be super competitive, but definitely a fun option. But moving back over, Walking Ballista, obviously just an upgrade over Chamber Sentry, but obviously the least budget friendly of all these cards. A card that you could include, it's only between $3 and $5, is Pelt Collector. This card slots in nicely over a Servant of the Scales, or even since you're going to lower your curve over Land of War Elves. And again, pretty inexpensive as far as dollars wise, but it is a card that's $3 to $5 per and may not be worth it considering how inexpensive this deck is. You can really get a lot of mileage out of this deck for under $50 in real life, I believe. And so if you have Pelt Collectors, play them. If you don't worry too much about it. Servant to the Scale is very, very good card, and you may even want to play both of them alongside each other. So if you're going to play Walking Ballista and you have Heliod, you might as well. It's just a combo that just wins the game immediately. And although it does take a lot of mana, it's just a natural combo, a natural backup plan to the beatdown plan to just kind of win the game on the spot. So again, if you have those cards and you want to slot them in, go for it. In my opinion, it would be an upgrade. Hangerback Walker, another one where if you don't have Ballista but you do have Walker, slot it in over the Chamber Sentry. Chamber Sentry, again, is fine, but if you're going to play an X-Spell, play this. If you only have a couple, leave the Sentry and substitute Pollen Bright Druid. This is probably the card I'd be willing to cut first, even though it's a solid effect. Or, again, if you couldn't find avatars you didn't want to, you could. I like the stats on this card a lot, but I don't know that it's necessary. But I do like the fact that it's got Trample. So I would find this card if you can. Maybe cut this card, maybe cut a Raptor, and throw in some Hangerback Walkers if you have access to them. Gerd for Battle is just a cute idea that if you didn't have Droka's Command or didn't want to play it, this is just a cheaper spell that adds a lot of +1/+1 counters depending on what you have in play, and obviously the +1/+1 counter is what we're going for. So Gerd for Battle, a solid option. A couple cards that are worth talking about, maybe in the sideboard, are Heroic Intervention. This card's going to get a lot cheaper because it's getting reprinted in M21. It's already down around $5, so if you're going to play this card, I would seriously consider trying to get this. Although it's not necessary, I do think it's going to be cheap enough coming up soon that it's going to be worth getting. A card that's already super inexpensive is Den Protector, and you could easily just play this in the main deck if you really wanted to, because it's got a sweet effect that says creatures with power less than it can't block it, and obviously we're going to try and make this guy as big as possible. Its Megamorph is to recur something, so if you are in a grindier matchup, this is going to help you out a lot to just win that attrition war, right? And the last card is Knight of Autumn, a solid card on its own. Again, could be worth playing in the main deck if you hated rishkar for some reason, or you wanted to up the count to some 3s, maybe not play Land of War Elves, something like that. If you had this card and you wanted to play it, it slots in fine because it's a big creature on its own, but also has that versatility of gaining you life or destroying artifacts or enchantments. So All right, guys, those are my thoughts on this. Again, if you want to find more from us at Crew3, you can listen to our weekly podcast where we talk about all things Pioneer. You can get that wherever you guys get your podcasts. We also have a Twitch stream up now. We have a Discord with over 100 plus people in it talking about Pioneer, just discussing Magic the Gathering in general. So if you guys want to join that, you can find it in a link below. And then obviously you can find us here on YouTube. So we hope you guys like it. Leave a comment if you can, because that's how the YouTube algorithm favorites our video or ups it in the suggested video column if you guys don't mind. So thank you guys for watching. We'll talk to you later.